We've heard it many times over the years, President Trump touting his so-called success and admiration for the African-American community. But is the feeling mutual? Our latest CBS News polling indicates it is not. At least at the ballot box, it isn't. Black voters overwhelmingly support Joe Biden. The former VP is polling at 90% with that group. But despite the consistent blue wave among Black Americans, there does remain a gender gap within the voting bloc. More Black women vote Democrat than Black men. The question of Black men's allegiance to the Democratic Party came under scrutiny recently. Rapper Ice Cube announced he is collaborating with the Trump administration on a project that would help invest money into Black communities. While the former NWA star never formally endorsed the president, his announcement was met with criticism. Rutgers University professor and self-proclaimed feminist Brittany Cooper berated Ice Cube and other Black men who would support a Republican, saying in a tweet, quote, "Apparently, y'all want to be to 2020 what white women were to 2016. Here was Ice Cube's take on the situation.
I'm not trusting any of them. I'm just going by action. That's all I'm going by. I'm not going by words. I'm not going by rhetoric, not going by media spin, not going by none of that. You know, I'm not on nobody's team. I'm not on Team Blue, not on Team Red.
So then I have that wrong.
I'm an independent person, and I believe that's what Black people need to do is become independent, and we need to get something for our vote.
For more, I want to bring in Ben Jealous. He's the president of People for the American Way. He is also the former president of the NAACP. Ben, thank you so much for being with us. And help us understand, if you will, why so many members of the African-American community are outraged by Ice Cube's collaboration with President Trump.
Well, you know, Trump asked famously, what do we have to lose? And we've seen brother after brother and sister after sister shot by the cops, while this president essentially seems to cheer the cops on, encourage more violence, encourage even, you know, armed folks who aren't officers to threaten Black Lives Matter protesters. At the same time, you know, for folks in my generation and in Cube's generation, Black men 35 to 54, our death rate from COVID is 10x our white peers. So it seems like we had a lot to lose. And when it feels like folks are supporting Trump, most folks in our community are outraged because it's very clear he intends to take us backwards, not forwards.
So let's talk a little bit about the differences, the traditional differences between Black men and Black women when it comes to voting. Why does it seem that Black women are a more reliable voting bloc for the Democratic Party? Are Black men feeling that, you know, Democrats take their vote for granted? What's the bigger issue here that many people might not understand?
Well, I mean, what you're talking about is at the margin. The question is that 90-something% of Black women and 80-something% of Black men, or is it just slightly lower 90s for Black men when it comes to supporting Democrats over Republicans? With that said, generally what you've seen is slightly more men than women supporting Trump in every racial group. And it seems to be, when you talk to folks, have something to do with his appeal to patriarchy. With Black men, the real issue is making sure that we turn out in big numbers. Andrew Gillum, Stacey Abrams would both be governors of their respective states, Florida and Georgia, if Black men in 2018 had turned out at the same rate as Black women. And so my group, we have in the last few weeks texted every single Black man under 50 who is a sporadic voter, they don't vote all the time, who has a cell phone on the voter roll. That's 2.5 million Black men. 90% of them have opened up the text, and 10% of them have engaged with us in conversations about how to vote. And, you know, that's what we have to be doing right now. I mean, since I first got involved in politics in the '88 Jesse Jackson campaign, we have pushed Black women's voting percentages higher and higher and higher. It's time for us to do the same thing with Black men.
All right, so recently President Trump's son-in-law and senior advisor Jared Kushner came under fire for comments he made yesterday on Fox News about the Black community and their desire for financial success. Let's listen to what he said, and I want to get your take on the other side.
We've seen in a lot of the Black community, which is mostly Democrat, is that President Trump's policies are the policies that can help people break out of the problems that they're complaining about, but he can't want them to be successful more than they want to be successful.
So, Ben, that's quite a statement from a man who has led a privileged life. I mean, Kushner doesn't quite seem to understand why some people can't just pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You know, is a statement like that going to cost President Trump a lot of the Black vote?
Jared Kushner is a crass opportunist. My family's from Baltimore. We've been there for more than 80 years. He's literally the worst slumlord in Baltimore. He uses a controversial practice known as body attachments that literally sends people to jail if they don't pay him rent. That's who Jared Kushner is. He's the worst slumlord in Baltimore. So folks in the Black community generally aren't really receptive to Jared Kushner acting like he's an expert on anything other than exploiting Black people.
All right. So meanwhile, we saw the Biden campaign mobilize President Obama to turn out the Black male vote in Philadelphia recently. Is this a sign the Biden camp is concerned, perhaps, that the Black male vote is waning? And by the way, what you said earlier is correct. It does seem that within many different voting blocks, when you break down the gender, you know, even within white voters, Latino voters, there is slightly more support among women than men. So it isn't just, you know, it isn't just a Black phenomenon. But is this a sign, though, that the Biden camp really wants to get male voters enthusiastic about getting out to the polls?
I mean, the reality is that most Black men have been dealing with deindustrialization now for 2 generations. And there is a skepticism about politics that set in with a lot of Black men because things don't seem to be getting better. There's a need for both candidates to really try to court that vote and assure them that they have a plan for life to get better and better and not worse and worse. And so that's what I think, you know, that is about. It's smart of the Biden campaign to really lean into young voters, Black male voters, and Latinx voters, because those are the demographics that will likely decide this race. They're the ones that will either turn out in big numbers and tend to support Biden, or they'll sit back and it will hurt him dearly. And that's why we focus on all 3 of those groups so intensely.
Right. And you recently wrote an op-ed in the Philadelphia Tribune in which you say there are major voter suppression efforts taking place within the Black community. Ben, our own CBS News polling finds that among likely Black voters under the age of 29, only a quarter of them feel their vote would be counted correctly this cycle. That's pretty upsetting news. How concerning is it that young African Americans, you know, the future of your party, don't feel comfortable or don't feel confident that their vote will make a difference?
Well, this is the impact of the federal government gutting the Voting Rights Act about 10 years ago. And these young people have come of age in a time of sort of maximum vulnerability of the vote. They've seen the President of the United States attack the post office during a pandemic when most people are, or at least record numbers of people, are expected to vote by mail. And so it's reasonable that they would be concerned about voter security. That's why we have to spend a lot of time assuring people that vote by mail is actually very reliable, which it is. That's why every soldier does it. That's why the president himself does it from Florida. And that's why we also have to spend a lot of time with young people, educating them that their vote is important, that voting is safe, and that if they vote, it really will make a difference. And it's real. If young people turn out in big numbers, they will decide who the next president of the United States is. And if they sit back and they don't vote passively, they'll decide to.
Right. One way or the other, they will decide. All right. Well, Ben Jealous, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time.